This is Geometry, Unit 3, Day 8. We're talking about parallel lines and different types of angles that are formed by the transversal. So what we're going to do with this first activity is, from the first picture, we're going to look at what type of angles these are, and then we're going to take the letters and place them in the correct spot in the bottom. So for example, in this first figure here, we have two angles that we're referring to. Remember that the angles in between the two lines, they're considered interior. So the A and the CN are definitely referring to angles that are exterior. Notice that those angles are on opposite sides of the transversal. So that's called alternate interior angles. Alternate exterior angles, actually. Exterior. So over here we would put a CN and also an A. So you go ahead and you look at these other figures, figure out what type of angles they're referring to, place those letters in the correct boxes, and then you unscramble the letters that are there. So go ahead, pause the video, and complete the other 5 figures. The H and the N, they are both on the same side of the transversal. They're both on top of the line. Compared to the vertex, they're up and to the left, up and to the left. So those are called corresponding. Here we're on the same side of the transversal. They're both interior angles. They're on the same side of the transversal, of course. They make a C shape. So they're consecutive interior. Here we have interior angles on opposite sides of the transversal, alternate interior angles. Here we have two lines, one's interior, one's exterior. They're on the same side of the transversal. They have different vertices. Of course, all of these examples have different vertices. They're from the vertex, it's up and to the right and up and to the right. So they're in corresponding locations. Here we're down and to the right, down and to the right. Also remember, with corresponding angles, it makes an F shape. So we could get an F shape. Here it would be an upside down looking F. And this one would be upside down and reversed. So now we're supposed to unscramble these words. So trying to figure out what these words could be. I see DOG, I see GOD, LOG, GLOD, GOLD. There's gold. Maybe that's it. This one, clearly, the only option it looks like is can. Here we're looking at the letters, trying to decide how to unscramble them. What do you think? Now, have you come up with the first word yet? N O T H I N G. Nothing gold can stay. Now we're looking in here. We need to find out the other angle measures. Notice the arrows that are on our two lines. Those arrows, if they're inside the lines, not the ones on the very ends, those just indicate that they're lines. These arrows that are inside the lines are telling us that the two lines are parallel. And we learned yesterday, if two lines are parallel, then corresponding angles are congruent. So what other angle is corresponding to this 125? From the vertex, it's down and to the right. So from the other vertex, it's down and to the right. So angle 7 is going to be 125. From this original 125, alternate interior angles would make angle 5 125. Corresponding to 5 would be what? Which angle is corresponding with the 5? From the vertex that's up and to the left. From the vertex that's up and to the left. So angle 1. If two lines are parallel, then corresponding angles are congruent. If two lines are parallel, then alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay, so now we go next to. So these two are side by side. They make this straight line. If you shade in their angles, you have half a circle. So this is going to be 180 minus 125, so that's 55 degrees. So 8 has to be 55. Corresponding with 8 would be which angle? That would be angle 4. Down and to the left, down and to the left. If two lines are parallel, then alternate interior angles are congruent. So what's an alternate interior angle with 4? 6. And then how can we figure out what angle 2 is? Several different ways. One, we could talk about a linear pair. Two different ways to get that. Vertical angles. Alternate exterior angles. If two lines are parallel, alternate exterior angles are congruent. Or if two lines are parallel, then corresponding angles are congruent. In every case, it's 55. Now on the next page, we're looking at a figure and we're trying to figure out the value of x. Notice that P and Q have the arrows in it. So we know that P is parallel to Q. Line P is parallel to line Q. These angles are interior. They're on opposite sides of the transversal, so they're called alternate interior angles. If two lines are parallel, then alternate interior angles are congruent. So we can set 9x equal to 72. And get x equals 8. That is not 8 degrees, because that's not an angle value. That's just a value of x. So for letter B, we have to decide what type of angles are these. First of all, we notice that line M is parallel to line N because of the extra arrows. Notice from the vertex they're up and to the right, so these are corresponding angles. If parallel lines, then corresponding angles are congruent. So we get 71 equals 2x plus 3. Divide by the 2. X would need to be, oh, I'm sorry, 71 minus 3 is 68, so that's going to be 34. This next figure, notice that the two lines are parallel. I look at these angles. Corresponding would be here. Consecutive interior would be here. Alternate interior angle would be there. Alternate exterior would be there. So these actually aren't any of those. So we have to figure out what's going to be the relationship between these angles. Well, if it was here, these would be consecutive interior. They would be supplementary. If that was the angle we were talking about, it's vertical with that. So these are the same regardless of what we're talking about. So these are going to be supplementary. So we know there's supplementary angles. If there's supplementary angles, then 3x minus 7 plus x plus 5 has to equal 180. So we get 45.5. Again, that's not degrees, because that's not an angle value. A common error occurs when more than one transversal is involved in a problem. Students incorrectly identify angle 1 and angle 2. Notice that there's no line connecting them. Here's your transversal. Alternate exterior angles would be there. corresponding angles would be here. So 1 and 3 don't have a special name. Students often incorrectly identify angles 1 and 2 as corresponding angles. Angles 1 and angle 2 are not corresponding angles because they are not formed by a pair of lines and one transversal. 3 and 4 are not alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior angles would be here. There's no line connecting 3 and 4. There's no line connecting 1 and 2. So they're not related at all. Okay, with example number 4, find the value of x. So what do we know when we look at this figure? We see it has a right angle. We notice the triangle here. So that tells us these two lines are parallel. If these two lines are parallel, notice this zigzag. So essentially you have these two parallel lines, you have a transversal, you have 4x, and you have 52. So these are alternate interior angles. If lines are parallel, then alternate interior angles are congruent. So 4x is going to equal 52. Now, how else are we going to figure out angle y? We see this is 90 degrees. This here, what type of angles together would that form? Well, that's like two parallel lines, transversal. Well, actually, sorry. The transversal we'd be dealing with this time would be coming straight down. It would be perpendicular here. So it's also going to be perpendicular there, because remember, consecutive interior angles are supplementary. So if one of them is 90, the other is going to be 90. So I know that 4x plus 3y plus 2 has to be 90 degrees. X is 13. Here we said 4 times 13 is 52. 52 and 2 is 54. Here we have 36. And y equals 12. It's not degrees, because the y is not just the angle. What do you see for this figure? I notice this line and this line are parallel. they have the triangles. So if this is 55 degrees, the vertical angle to it is 55 degrees. Then we have a linear pair. Or I guess they're not linear, are they? Because there's linear pair implies that there's only two angles. This has three angles, but still it adds up to 180. Let's see if we can figure out what one of these other angles are first. We have a pair of parallel lines. We have this transversal. This angle is 65. And this angle over here must be 65. If parallel lines, then corresponding angles are congruent. So x is going to equal 65, and that's going to be degrees because it is the actual angle. And then we're going to say that 65 plus 55 plus the y equals 180. Because they form this straight line. It's half a circle. $120. Subtract the 120. So y is 60, and that's also going to be degrees because that is the actual angle. What do you notice here? You have parallel lines. You have to look for these different parts. You're looking for alternate interior angles, you're looking for corresponding angles, consecutive interior angles, and alternate exterior angles. You have the zigzag. You have two parallel lines and a transversal. This is your x. This is your 45. Alternate interior. If lines parallel, alternate interior angles are congruent. So x equals 45 degrees. So this angle here is 85. This angle here is corresponding to it. So y is going to equal 85 degrees. So on the last page, what we're noticing is the converse of our corresponding angles. If two lines are cut by a transversal, so corresponding angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. So our wording is going to be if corresponding angles are congruent, then lines parallel. So this is a converse from what we talked about in the past. If two lines are cut by a transversal so that alternate interior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. if alternate interior angles are congruent, then lines parallel. So this is proving lines parallel. If two lines are cut by a transversal, so alternate exterior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. If alternate exterior angles are congruent, of course, angles can't be parallel. And then finally, if two lines are cut by a transversal, so consecutive interior angles are supplementary, then the lines are parallel. If consecutive interior angles are supplementary, then lines parallel. So these words, the sentences that I've written out, are a little bit shorter than what the original statement is. It just makes it a little bit easier to write. It's still a lot of words. Good luck.